Hi everyone, we are from Group 1 of Workshop 4, Leonardo Vincent and Andrew Kurniawan. We will be presenting our project, Karang Antu Monument Garden. Our presentation will consist of 3 parts. The first part will explain the basic concept of our garden proposal. The second part will talk about the site, and the third part will talk about the design, along with explanation of the garden traditions we adopted for each garden sequence. Part 1. The basic concept of the proposal is drawn from the history where Japanese used to colonize Indonesia in 1942. It was tragedy that no one wanted to have ever happen. Hence, this proposal is an attempt to showcase that these two historically conflicting cultures, Indonesian and Japanese, can be clashed and eventually merge to create a beautiful harmony in the manifestation of an abstracted contemporary version. It is a garden to reflect and remember. It is an optimistic satire to our past. The combination of the two garden traditions is inspired by alun-alun garden composition. Alun-alun is a specific type of Indonesian garden. Historically, they are closely related to Japanese palaces with various utilities for ceremonial palace, meditation space, as well as training yard. In modern day, they are reappropriated into public squares in front of town halls across every city in Java, Indonesia. Alun-alun always has strong north-south axis with expansive open space surrounding it. This symbolizes that in one's life journey, you will strive to walk on the straight or correct direction, although worldly pleasure on the right and left will always seduce you. Indonesian alun-alun gardens is all about ritual, procession, hence they have axial importance. On the other hand, Japanese gardens have major agenda to imitate nature. Hence, they often display irregular organic forms and aesthetic. Thus, the proposal is an amalgamation of the two, alun-alun axis as a straight path, and the Japanese irregularity as the distractions on the right and left. Part 2. The site for our project is in Indonesia, specifically in Java Island. The reason we chose this site is because of its historical significance, with the narrative that Japanese used to colonize Indonesia back in 1942. It is in the heart of Banten Bay, the first entry point of Japanese Empire to Java Island back then. It is under the Banten province, around 100 kilometers from Jakarta, the capital city of Indonesia. Zooming in, our proposed site is in the edge of Karang Antu Port. Karang Antu Port is a fishery port located on the north of Karang Antu city. The site itself is an existing mangrove tourism site, although it is very informal without any proper infrastructure. In its surrounding, there are several important features, including a military watch post and its fishery high school complex, as well as a mosque. There is also a small tourism village in the neighborhood. The active fishery port itself is located a few kilometers into the island. Hence, our site is utilizing the underused port construction that protrudes towards the sea. Part 3. Capitalizing the expanse and the linearity of the site, along with beautiful sceneries all around, we decided to design 3 sequences of interventions organized along the original port structure. As mentioned before, the master plan composition is an amalgamation of alun-alun axis as a straight path and Japanese irregularity as the distractions on the right and left, the follies in the 3 sequences. In terms of the geometries of these follies, we really try to keep them simple, but rather more focused on the meaning of the garden traditions that we adopted, as well as the spatial and atmospheric experience. The simplicity combined with the materiality allow each space to be a blank canvas, spaces to reflect to the story of the garden. The first sequence is the entry point of the garden. Indonesian alun-alun principle that we adopted for this sequence is the boundary fencing, where historically some part of alun-alun has limited access to the public since it is a part of the palace. Japanese garden principle that we adopted for this sequence is the entry slope that are often implemented in famous gardens in Japan, for example in the Kenroku-en in Kanazawa. Philosophically, this slope tried to imitate the experience of climbing a mountain, where you need to put effort to climb the slope and building up your expectation, so when you arrive on top, you are rewarded with the view of a beautiful garden. Thus, this sequence is all about creating a threshold between the outside and the inside of the garden. It is a space that reorienting you to a different atmosphere. The folly is a slope of going down and up, with a planted concrete blade spanning on top of it. This sequence houses the amenities for the garden. This includes a roadside parking area and an amenity pavilion placed under the concrete canopy at the bottom of the slope, with visitor center, small shops, and toilets. The sloping earth on the right side of the road is also densely vegetated with shrubs, spanning more openly to create welcoming atmosphere when you enter. It is also a mean to provide view when you are sitting and resting on the seats on the left side. The canopy tectonic is thicker, extending the landscape from the right side and become thinner to the left, allowing vegetation to grow on top of it denser from the right and lighter to the left. This is intended to frame the view beyond. The concrete blade is relatively level to the original topography. Thus, when you approach the garden from afar, it appears as a strip of vegetation, acting as a fence for the garden. It is introverted until you are getting closer. The concrete canopy is elevated with a gap to catch water reflection, creating a rich atmosphere when people take shelter underneath the canopy. Combined with apertures on the concrete blade, this water reflection on its belly appears as an inversion, an abstracted version of Japanese rock garden. The dynamic water reflection as the raked gravel, and the apertures as the set stones. Other than implementation of garden traditions, this slope is also an abstraction of salim gesture or kissing hand with your forehead. This is an important Indonesian culture that means to pay respect to elderly people. Thus, the gesture of going down and up before entering signify that with bodily gesture, we are entering this respectful and sacred space.
The second sequence of the garden lies 150 meters from the beginning of the site. Being at the midpoint of the port, this sequence in a manner of speaking acts as a main garden for the project. This specific sequence goal was to carefully thread balance between the two differing Asian garden philosophies from Indonesian and Japanese gardens to create a new narrative that hopefully strengthens the meaning of each respective traditions. The aspect of Indonesian alun-alun garden philosophy we implemented in this part of the garden is the use of a long symmetrical axis that reflects living with devotion and focus, symbolizing a determination towards holiness and serenity through the avoidance of worldly distractions and desire, a tradition prominently found in the iconic alun-alun of Yogyakarta. The Japanese garden tradition we implemented, on the other hand, is the emphasis on strategic meandering pathways, where the circulation within the garden are carefully controlled to accommodate intentionally composed views, which was clearly manifested in the Eishobashi Bridge of Kenroku-en in Kanazawa. Furthermore, we implemented miniaturized turtle islands, commonly used as view creating aspects of traditionally Japanese gardens, housing curated vegetations that are carefully placed in vast garden ponds, usually used as pictorial devices. In this sequence, there lies two main types of circulation. First, the main straight path, the second, the peripheral meandering pathways. The main path continues the undisrupted view towards the end of the sea end of the port, symbolizing the righteous and devoted path of the alun-alun. And the meandering path symbolizes a paths of worldly distractions made by using traditional Japanese garden circulation techniques. The main path is strengthened by carefully placed walls of concrete that focuses its view to the alun-alun gates at the end of the project. It is accommodated with carefully placed open areas to the seaside and a 1 meter distance from the main circulation to avoid claustrophobia while still giving some sense of enclosure. The openings placed in these walls are cut accordingly to specific angled views with implemented various meanings, such as west-facing Qiblat, which is a tradition directly to face the Kaaba from Muslim traditions, east-facing that face directly to Keraton Yogyakarta, which is the most prominent alun-alun in Indonesia, true east meaning the relationship between mankind to each other, with the traditional tree placed on the right side of a traditional alun-alun, and etc. Meandering pathways that symbolize worldly beautiful views are meant to attract and tempt people to walk away from the straight path, for them to experience landscapings of the strategically placed turtle islands that house saltwater tolerant tropical plants. All of the paths of this circulation has been carefully considered to have specific views, made into checkpoints by strategic placement of turtle islands, so no view is unintentionally curated. The views utilizes the surrounding context hills nearby the sea in Karang Bay to add to their significances. The paths utilizes timber decking as its main material with the intent of making users to be more conscious of their paths. Slight sounds of creaking emulate feelings of fragility, as well as mimicking Japanese timber bridges and seaside piers. The few framing walls are made with concrete, continuing the typology of the concrete harbor and the other concrete-made elements that have been placed throughout the project. The third sequence, it is the end or climax of the garden. Indonesian alun-alun principle that we adopted for the sequence is the same as the principle that we used to organize the master plan of the garden. It is the axis of the alun-alun, along with vastness of the space around it. More specifically, we adopt one of the main features that always present in alun-alun, the twin banyan tree. This feature symbolizes the micro and macrocosmos in Indonesian ancient philosophies. That means the relation between human and the universe. Japanese garden traditions also has similar principles regarding vastness. It often appears as an important intention that Japanese try to achieve when they make lake gardens. More importantly, the sequence will adopt Japanese view framing techniques that are constantly present in their garden, a garden as a painting. This sequence is a folly that exclusively acts as a reflective space. It is not trying to intervene so much, but rather the sequence is attempting to be a frame that enhances the already poetic scenery and the story of the space. The elements are simply the port structure, adjacent to 6 concrete posts organized to create view framing linearity from the port into the nothingness of the horizon. The 2 posts in the middle are the abstraction of the twin banyan tree of alun-alun, while the 4 others are arranged tunneling to enhance the frame. The port structure is modified to slope down into the water on its end. Again, this is a gesture to create a relationship to the axiality towards the water itself, creating an illusion of a blurred boundary between the port, the water, and nothingness, the universe. The banyan tree is represented as twin concrete posts, with boulders suspended from its tip. This is similar to Yukitsuri method in Japanese garden traditions, where tree branches are suspended with ropes to create wide canopy spanning close to the water. This is a feature to enhance phenomenological experiences beyond the visuals of the space. The smell of the sea, the bodily friction to take a grip on the concrete slope, or even to sit down. The sound of boulders gently clashing to one another, blown by the ocean winds. The lights penetrating between its gaps.